Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second day of EA Global Summit 2022. This is Nabil from the EA Global Summit organizing team. Thanks, everyone, for joining us and for your interest for this session. The session will be presented by Peter Lieber. Peter is an enterprise architect expert, plays role of president at Association of Austrian Software Innovation and leading innovations at Spark Systems Central Europe and Lieber Software. Today, Peter is presenting about model maturity integration, which is an extension of capability maturity model integration. So before we start the presentation, let me explain how the participants can interact with Peter. Since the participants are muted throughout the session, if you have any questions during the session, you can use the chat window to drop your questions to the speaker, and we will be reading out the questions and the speaker will answer during the Q&A session at the end. To enable collaboration and communication with Peter directly after the session, we request you to visit the channel, Teams channel, and I'll be sharing the link in the chat. And if you have any question, any difficulties in accessing the Teams channel, please reach us via registrations at eaglobalsummit.com. I'll also paste the email in the chat. So thanks once again for your interest and support to the EA Global Summit 2022. Looking forward to the wonderful session with Peter. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Have a nice evening, night if it's in Australia, or lunchtime in US, I think, something like that. I'm going to talk about today about the model maturity model integration. And as I'm really more than 30 years in business and started as a developer, I was always afraid about CMMI and stuff. But as time goes by and on, and I'm getting older and more responsible for stuff and models and also for bigger customers, there is a new way in my head of thinking how to keep that maturity level or reach a higher maturity level as typically you have in your organization maybe. So it is not only about to create valuable models, it's also about creating indispensable models. And the model maturity model, and it's a kind of a tongue breaker because model is 2 times here. Maybe we find a better word later on, it's just a working title. But it's all about how to increase the value of your models in your organizations, and not only for a one-time effect, but for a longer journey. Here, a short introduction of mine, because I did not make the video run and I did not want to restart the camera just right before the session. But if you don't have seen me so far, I'm looking like this. You can find me also in LinkedIn and everywhere. My current position is I'm the CEO of Spark Systems Central Europe. There I focus on enterprise architect, pro cloud server, and Prolaborate, focusing on license sales. And I also started to become a CEO for Spark Services. And here we have a little focus on enterprise architecture management. We have a special landing page for it based on the Spark's ecosystem. So it's not only about selling tools anymore only, but also to help organizations to get it into run, to combine it with existing technologies, to provide some support around the product. And we learned already it's not that easy, because a lot of different organizations are different, and it's not easy to understand everybody's other's business. So we are really focusing on that, what we can provide with tools and the ecosystem, and very often we are cooperating with other consulting companies to get it into run in your organization. After Corona, during Corona, I became Austrian Entrepreneurs Association president. This is the oldest organization in Austria related to entrepreneurs, meaning since 1839 or something like that. If you are familiar with history, there was a Kaiser in Austria and Fürst Metternich, and he changed almost Europe that time after Napoleon Wars. And then this was founded, and I'm really proud to lead that organization at the moment with more than 3,000 companies integrated. And this makes definitely sense because I'm really focused on EAM since some years. Maybe a little outlook for the next year. There will be a renaissance of model-based systems engineering, also from the perspective of Spark Services. And so next year we will come up with some model-based systems engineering again, also from the services side. in Spark Systems, there's all there. You know, 80 modeling languages and stuff and everything around, but from the services perspective, we will have to give another domain, and you know that's very different. And this is also very special to enterprise architect. You have different domains, different languages for all domains, and also different competitors. And this is a part of the fun story to cooperate and to be part of the Spark's story of success. My personal belief is that innovation needs models. So it's not all about documentation. So I think documentation is worth, and also models are able to generate documents, very often static documents from the past, but nowadays it's more live documents. But I really believe on this innovation aspect of models. And as innovation means it's new, it's not in the market, but it has to go to the market, because innovation is only innovation if it reaches the market. Then I really trust that innovation needs models, that people that are not able to understand are getting open ears and eyes and understand what's behind. But models, and you know, even the term is challenging. We are currently in an artificial intelligence project. It's a research project with Infineon and others, and Monteo around ecological motor drive systems for electronic vehicles, to optimize that, to make it more energy efficient and so on. But models is a term that is used very often. You have, of course, in the real world, you have models that are nice people, or you have models for with what we have in mind. It's UML, it's SysML, it's BPMN, so such kind of models. And of course, there are AI models. So there's the same terms and same terminology, but totally different meanings. So it's very important, if you want to drive innovation, to make clear which kind of models you mean, and how you interact with the terms and terminology. And their enterprise architect is a real day-to-day helper, and you will see how to make it even better. So the challenges, so to go a little bit around the agenda, I will address the challenges. Who has been at the session from Horst yesterday will have seen it already, but I think it can't be repeated enough. Then how to become successful as a general aspect. Then which are the 5A that you need? And then we come into the model, maturity model, and I will do some live stuff. Please do not over expect. I do really classical things, but I do live modeling because I just want to describe the architecture, or how enterprise architect is and its ecosystem is built up, and why there are nowadays more challenges than in the past to get this thing also in place. And Nissam is doing a great job, or ProLabor is doing a great job to make it easier again. But yes, if you want to reach the world and not only the neighbor, it's more than just one screw you have to tackle. So the challenges. Challenges in the past, we thought everything can be solved by a tool. So tool is one aspect, but in reality, it's also about the language. And with language, in this case, I mean UML, SysML, Archimate, BPMN, Babok as a variant of a language, wireframing, risk taxonomies, threat modeling, and so on and so forth. So languages, you have to understand the language and to make proper models, and not only to create boxes and lines and drawings. This is also a challenge itself, that there's a difference between making nice diagrams and to create models. But this is an aspect. Then kind of a methodology. Is it really part of a V model and you have a design up front and you have a test model at the end, or you have a more agile approach to deal with the modeling aspects? How do you collaborate together? And also here, enterprise architect provides a lot of possibilities, and to combine every possibility is not that clever. You have to find the way how you want to collaborate, and then find out which support you get from the tools, and then tackle it and find out, okay, this is the way you want to go. And of course, you need some experience. I see here in the list of participants, the minimum 10 persons I know in person who are experts in enterprise architect already, and have also made their experience in their ecosystems with their project. And hopefully they are still open-minded to think about new aspects or new tryouts, how to cooperate in the future based on enterprise architect ecosystem. Because just to let you know, and this is maybe a clear session, a clear message, a fool with a tool is just a fool. And the second, a genius without a tool is not productive. Have a genius in mind using flip chart to model stuff. Yes, it's maybe great what he is modeling, but you cannot share or make a picture of it, and then you have no model who looks at the picture, and it has no meaning. So we need to tackle that as well. And what we have learned it's not very popular to talk about failure. And a lot of people think, hey, to talk about fuck ups or failure is not very proper. And hey, show us the heroes and show us the people that succeeded and have been very successful. And I'm starting a session and say how we can fail with our modeling approach. And because we have seen quite a lot of things over the years, and it is true that people also leave us because of complexity, misunderstanding, but luckily some of them are coming back and we are always growing. So we have more people coming to us and say, hey, great what you're doing. And I think it could be even greater if you have in mind how not to fail, because others have failed and you can learn of these mistakes and errors. And therefore, I always bring also this presentation also for new customers, and they're always very impressed. So if you see the benefit of modeling and over time, and you have just this first approach could end up in a mess. Yeah, so everything is connected with everything because somebody said you have to have this connectivity. It's very intuitive to make that, but you are lost in complexity over time. You are maybe alone, and to share that is nearly impossible. So you typically fail with that do whatever you want approach. A second approach could be that you define a target, but it is too complex because you try to use a lot of features and capabilities, but your team is not ready. The experience is not there, and you have not enough support, meaning from Spark Services, as an example, or from our partners that can give you a hand, and then you will always fail and say, very often people say the tool is crap. Hey, but it's not true. It's the mixture of the things that are bringing to this complexity. You can get a lot of complexity out of enterprise architect if you configure it correctly, and so on and so forth. So, and if you have this in mind, language, method, experience, and tool, then you may come to a strategic aim where you want to go. And this is even higher. You want to raise big benefits, and the time should be not there. It should be kind of the middle term. And then it could be an approach that you go to the top 5 consultancy companies and say, hey, go on, make my enterprise architecture ready for my 800 applications I have in my organization. And these external consultants are rushing you with hundreds of people, make a perfect enterprise architecture. But at a specific point in time, you find out, oh my goodness, this is far too complex. I will not get it in my organization. And what happens? It fails totally. It costs a lot of money. The benefit was almost there, but if you try to get in the organization, you failed. So because you try to make all at once with a big step, with a big bang. And I think modeling, and this is a thing what we have learned, modeling was never a hype. Maybe at the very beginning, but the audience was very small. But compared to other technologies in the market or other strategies in the market, modeling was never a hype, but it was always there, and it was always increasing and always a growing market. And there is competition, what means, hey, there is a market that is far bigger than we know as we are only in our domain. So what would be a more clever approach is to find a step that is a useful one. It could be generating documentation. It could be finding a nice add-in to Enterprise Architect, and I'm a friend of add-ins for Enterprise Architect, like document generation from EA Docs that is a helper for stuff, or you use the document generation feature built in Enterprise Architect to generate Word documents that have not to be manipulated. Could be a very first step. Then you stay on that level at time to find out, hey, is it good for me? Is it good for the others? And then you can go to the next step, and so on and so forth. And so you have a more iterative approach onwards. So it's typically not 3 steps. It's just a symbolization what you can achieve over time. And this is very important to have in mind. So once again, I repeat it almost since 3 or 4 years already. This is, and it improves already. It's already improved. There's no the lines here, but it's very important to have this in mind. There is a lot of possibilities to fail, and I think it's very clever to think in big wins, in short wins, and so on, and then to share the launch with the people. What you need, and this is also very underestimated, you need, of course, I tried to find 5 A's just to make it like a consultant. I've learned from the consultants. Yes, you need awareness from the management. Enterprise architect makes the starting point very easy. We see that later. So get an enterprise architect, install enterprise architect. It's a long story of success that you can get enterprise architect very easy. You can just download the trial version even without registering, and then you need to get with your work what you do with enterprise architect. You need the awareness, otherwise it will not grow in the organization. You need attention. You need to have time with it. You have to be with your models and as a more or less daily buddy. You need architects, architecture, and last but not least, architecture management. And now if you go to the maturity model, I was really reading about the CMMI. I think 30 years or 25 years ago, a guy from Siemens in the railway industry said, hey, Peter, you have to go through that. You are a software guy. You have to fulfill maturity level and so on and so forth. And I think the only organizations I know that have reached CMMI level 4 or 5 are placed in India, because they are very structured, very concrete, and thank you for hosting this event and showing how structured you are. But in Europe, it was more, hey, I'm level 1, I'm great, I have something, or nothing. It's initial. I have no defined process. I just develop. And the second one is managed to have, we have a plan, what we are doing, and then it's going to define and so on and so forth. But for models, there was nothing. It was for product and service development, there was a special edition for development. For service, it was for service. There's also a CMMI for services. And for, again, for product service acquisition, that's kind of a nightmare that we have all to deal with, is that the acquisition process for software is also well defined. But where is CMMI for architecture? Where is CMMI for model-based architecture? So there is nothing. And because I don't want to touch the wording and pronunciation, I just named it model maturity model integration, related to capability maturity model integration. What is the characteristics by the CMMI? So first is the level 1 initial. You do what you want. It's the developer hero. He knows everything. He does everything. And you can compare it a little bit to the modeling hero. Then the next step is processes characterized for projects is often reactive. Okay, there is an issue. I react, but I have no plan. I just, we need to have a process. Then we define the process because we have to define it. Later on, you have an active management of a process, and it's proactive. So you have to live it. Their developers also run away from organizations. Oh my God, now it's so restricted. And then we come to level 4 and level 5, it's optimizing already. But again, what does it mean in the context of models, in the context of enterprise architect models, of course, in my world? So I have a little bit reframed and say, okay, level 1, 2, 3, 4. And what does it mean in the day-to-day life? And if you start with enterprise architect, a lot of people start to have to download enterprise architect. It's the start phase, it's the rep phase. And here we are really strong as Sparks. It is easy to get enterprise architect. It is easy to install. It is easy to run as long as you have administrative rights, but we have now a zero installer. So even if you don't have administrative rights, you can copy the files and the files of the installer to any directory you have. And even then you can start and work with enterprise architect. So just go and purchase a license, install EA, run EA, but the collaboration is me, myself, and I, so we are free. So I do it for me, I do it myself, and I do it with me again. And so it's the collaboration point is here not interesting. The good thing is I can structure the models or the packages or the elements as I wish. I don't have to discuss with anybody if it's great or not, if it's clever or not. I do it as I feel it's right. And that's also a very important approach. So you can start with Enterprise Architect without knowing too much about structuring. But later on, it would be clever to have kind of a training to find a good structure. But hey, as a beginner, just do it. Yeah, and use what I want and need. And later, the next low-hanging fruit is, hey, I have created a great model. I have created big and valuable diagrams, and then I create documents, HTML, and I share maybe also parts of the model. In my personal life, I do this daily. So I use it for any kind of ideas, any thoughts, for some private stuff like wedding planning. I do not marry too often, 2 times enough. For funeral planning, so this is the bad side of my life, that some people dying already around me, but to make a plan of it, it's really clever. Instead of writing emails and writing papers about how to plan a funeral. The household organization, so even my kids are involved in Enterprise Architect, because if the planning for no, not for the planning for the toilet is not a plan, but the planning who is making the household, who is taking care, what has to be done first, how to feed the animals. So that's all an Enterprise Architect in my world. So, and how this is implemented in Enterprise Architect is the same. So the deployment model of Enterprise Architect itself, and this is what I'm going to build up right now. I just created a view of how to deploy Enterprise Architect. So Sparks ecosystem maybe is the right word. And I was thinking about, hey, take some modern aspect or take some classical aspect. And I decided, no, I will do a very traditional one. I just, yes, having 2 screens is sometimes challenging. I just use the simple deployment diagram, and I say, okay, this is my single user deployment scenario. And my single user deployment scenario, yes, I have a node, and this node is some desktop or a notebook, whatever. Could be a MacBook. There is a great thing that you can run Enterprise Architect, even it's a rich application on all platforms almost. As a fun fact or real fact, development is done using Linux Mint. So there is almost no Windows except for testing, I think in Australia. Maybe there's some more, but not for developers. And here we have a desktop, and the easy thing is we have one component. The component is called EA. Also known as Enterprise Architect, because my son always thinks EA means EA Games and they do all the gaming. But in my world, it's Enterprise Architect. And what you do with Enterprise Architect, what I have done right now here, I have created a local repository, and it is just an artifact. The artifact is nowadays, it's a QEX file. It's my personal recommendation for local repositories. If you use 64-bit, it's SQLite, it's fast, it's performant, and I really appreciate that new file format. And I make a very simple model. I use associations only, and if I'm clever, I can already, beside the drawing, I can also define multiplicity and say, okay, one Enterprise Architect, of course, one Enterprise Architect has minimum one, otherwise it's not clever, repositories. So maybe we can name this, because it is a database. It's always a database in Enterprise Architect world. We name it very often repository. And a little bit challenging, there was in the past project browser, but still project is a name that is also here. So maybe we have another term for almost the same thing. And to make this somehow clear, you can also visualize that in the model. That's all. So starting Enterprise Architect is that easy as that scenario. You just install it or copy it. So it's even not required to install it. Start modeling, just create a file, structure a package, make as you wish. I have already here some hierarchy, and that's all. So that's the simple world. And this was, I think, before 5 years, that was our world, nothing else. Maybe some import-export capabilities, working together with others, yes. But I stay with that because I want to go to the next approach. So that means if your modeling work was helpful for your organization, not for yourself, but for your organization, maybe or hopefully your colleagues are also interested to start modeling. Of course, with Enterprise Architect, why they should look at another tool, because you do great work and Enterprise Architect was helpful for you, why not for the others? And then we come to the next level of modeling, and then you are not alone anymore. Yeah. So again, the architecture is a little bit, the idea is a little bit focused on what you have already. In the past, maybe you can have here directly enter a database, so meaning SQL Server, Oracle, or any other database. But nowadays, we really recommend to use ProCloud Server, and I will show you in a minute why a hybrid scenario makes also sense. But here I focus a little bit on that was our recommendation. And so if you start collaboration, you will have a ProCloud Server middle. You will have kind of a central repository. You will use ProCloud Server. It's very clever because it's free of charge if you're only using Enterprise Architect. If you're just working partly on it, you can use floating licenses. The licenses are also provided by ProCloud Server. The protocol is also nice. It's HTTP. I recommend HTTPS, of course. So you use HTTPS, and if you want to use it as a key store server, you have to use HTTPS. And so it's also nice to get to the database. You don't have to configure database access. You go using HTTPS. The only challenge you have is to find a common structure. You have to agree with your colleague. It's only one, or if it's 5, then it's easy to agree on a common approach. So you can't see my hands, but I'm moving with my hands and my face, but sorry, the camera is not working. Trust me. I really try to be as near to you as possible without that you can see me, but yes. But you have to define your common structure. Think about packages, think about diagrams, elements. You have already to start thinking as you're in a small team and you're all on the same table. This is not really a challenge, but if you are having colleagues in Austria, India, Chicago, wherever on the world, and this happens during Corona very often, and that's also why ProCloud Server was dramatically increasing in salary, because people identified, hey, a central database means that you need a big bandwidth to the database, and if the database connection is lost because at home people don't have good database connections, then they can go either to Citrix or any other desktop sharing environment or use ProCloud Server. But you have to think about collaboration challenges like locking, like visibility levels. So it's kind of a secret that there is also visibility levels. It's not my personal favorite feature because it's built into the database. It's a little bit hard to configure, has some challenges, but it's worth thinking about it. At least because in the lock mechanism for Enterprise Architect on root, also for insiders, the model root is the very topmost element in Enterprise Architect. On model root level, you can say hide for other groups. So there is a locking that allows to avoid that other can see another root node, just to let you know. And visibility level gives a little bit deeper, but on database level, and you have to deal a little bit with more connectivities. So a little bit challenging feature, but it's also possible to define it. Some people have it. The majority that are real open-minded modelers don't want to avoid duplicates. And with visibility levels, there is a good chance that you create a lot of duplicate things, and therefore I don't like too much visibility levels, but some cases need that. You have maybe to think about activating EA security, that you know who has done what somehow. You can activate audit if you really wish, and you can already start thinking about using Collaborate with live access. So if you have a central repository, why not sharing also with the wider audience already here in this stage? So what does it mean in Enterprise Architect logic? So we can go for another diagram, because as you know, a diagram is just a viewpoint. So we make this multi-user. And in the multi-user system, of course, we still have the desktop. We still have, of course, let's just take Enterprise Architect. We still have Enterprise Architect, but we will have another node. And the other node is, I mentioned ProCloud Server. I would name it Application Server. This application server has a component, and here I make it a little bit bigger because I have a plan with it already. And there's this component is called ProCloud Server. We shortcut it sometimes with PCS, so just ProCloud Server. In reality, it's named server and cloud. It must not be in the cloud. It must not be on a dedicated server. It is in reality a service. And ProCloud Server means that you can run it in the cloud ecosystem, but you cannot run it also on premise. So this is a service. What this service has, it has some interfaces. Also, again, for the pure modelers, please, sorry for making shortcuts, but I just create now an element that okay, it provides an interface. And the interface it's providing, it's an HTTPS interface. And this is on port, by default, it's port 1805. Of course, you can switch it to 4 for free. But this is the default port, the default interface. And Enterprise Architect, again, a simplification, just uses that. So I must just use of it. And use, there is a protocol behind, but just to let you know, this is a specific one. If you want to know what's behind, I think it's called SSIP. There's an extension SSIP. It just hears on Sparks Cloud Link, I think. I have not the exact name, but Sparks Cloud Link.ssip. So it's just identifying if there's traffic having that one, if there are parameters behind it, knows it's coming from Enterprise Architect. And the ProCloud Server in that kind of usage is for free because it's for Enterprise Architect only. What the ProCloud Server also provides, maybe I go first to this artifact, meaning the licenses. So it holds these SS keys files. So you can have this ProCloud Server can be your new license server. Again, I make it simple. This is a one-to-one relationship because there's only one SS key files, but there's a nice structure where you can define which kind of users have which license. So that's a nice capability. And the old license server is deprecated. So if you're still using the old license server, I grab ProCloud Server and activate HTTPS and change it to ProCloud Server and don't use the old one. Still there for traditional reasons, but it's deprecated, just to let you know. So, but where is the data? So the ProCloud Server itself has no database, but it has the same capability as Enterprise Architect. So of course you can have kind of a local database, but the recommendation is already to think a little bit bigger. And so you have some database server. And the database server, as you may know, can be more formats. So you can really choose which database format you want to have. In a Windows environment, it could be Microsoft SQL Server, but it could be others, yeah, like Oracle. And I'm really proud that we are making it Oracle really performant again. Hopefully not everybody will switch to Oracle back, but that's a great news. MariaDB as an example, or MySQL, or Postgre, just samples, Postgres. And these are real database servers, meaning that this is also a service having their own pros and cons. My personal recommendation, I like Microsoft SQL Server, and MySQL MariaDB is almost the same base. That's my personal favorites because I have the feeling that the way of how Enterprise Architect stores data and deals with data, that these two types is not creating too much headaches. And then you have, again, databases. So databases, this is one database as an example, and you can of course have more than one database. And how it's performed. The ProCloud Server is having a configuration. It's called Database Managers, and then it's doing the stuff going from Enterprise Architect to ProCloud Server. And here is the relationship. Of course, I missed a thing that is in Enterprise Architect since ever. Of course, it's possible that you have a direct connection from Enterprise Architect to the database. This is important, and you can use it in parallel. So this is kind of the old way. So it was allowed that Enterprise Architect, maybe if you go to the start page, you have cloud connection, server connection, URL connection, and local files. The cloud is the ProCloud server. The server connection is a database. So that's the truth. And here you had to configure on Enterprise Architect side. So you really can show it. If you go here and say server connection, this is new one. Our direct database server connections. So it's not OLEDB automatically. So it's our new native drivers. But I think there is still the capability to say connect to server, and here we have this ODBC native connection, ODBC stuff. So native is pretty new, so we are trying to get rid of dependencies from Microsoft, so more or less. And here we have this direct database connection. So here we can use, let's say, ODBC or OLEDB or native drivers. But we have to configure it on the desktop. And if you have more users, every user must get this link. Of course, we have a nice feature that we can encrypt the connection so that you don't have to share the database users, but you have direct access. And I think what is even more important, it's stateful. So if you make that kind of relationship, then you have to guarantee that the connection is not lost if you are working with the database. Otherwise, you will get connection lost. Really, please restart Enterprise Architect. Maybe you have seen that already, but you have a stateful connection, meaning do that only if you're nearby the server or have a LAN connection, just to let you know. This one is in between the ProCloud server and the SQL server is exactly the same. So you can really copy that one. But it is a server and a server, and it makes sense that these two servers are nearby. Yeah? Let me name it like that. But here, this relationship from Enterprise Architect to ProCloud service using HTTPS, what does it mean? It means it's stateless. What does it mean? What happens if you lose the connection? Enterprise Architect will pop up a window and say, oh my goodness, I have lost the connection during the last transaction. And he retries as long as ever, forever. He retries to rebuild the connection. Of course, if you are not then dropping or closing Enterprise Architect, of course, then the connection is lost. But if you keep it open and have the connection again because your mobile gets already connected, then you can go on working without restarting Enterprise Architect. So this is the benefit of having a stateless relationship. Again, my recommendation is, of course, that the application server, the database server are almost near, also meaning the same machine or the same cluster, but minimum in the same network segment. But you see already, compared to single user scenario, multi-user is already a little bit more complex. And just to say, okay, the ProCloud service scenario is an alternative, of course, because from a historical point of view, there was always a direct database connection. But here it makes definitely sense because of licensing, because of manageability, because you have able to configure the database connections here on the ProCloud server. It is nice. And there are more benefits with ProCloud server. Other benefits are, and now we're going a little bit to commercial features. There's also another provided interface. I simplified with OSLC. There's an OSLC interface. It's a REST API because if you not have heard about it, it's called Open Service for Lifecycle. It's a RESTful API using RDF. That's the only downside, but I don't think it's possible to do it a different way. But you have an open interface to ProCloud server. And this open interface to ProCloud server allows, and remember my presentation, I said it's possible already to think about in such scenario to use Proliberate. And if we want to bring Proliberate into the game, I will do it with another node. Of course, you can combine nodes, but to make it a little bit clear, there is a web server. So it sounds a little bit traditional what we are doing here. But traditional is not always bad. It's guarantees stability. IT will accept it. And there is another component. This great component is called Proliberate. And this Proliberate is using, as a matter of fact, this interface. Only thing I can make a legend out of it. If you want to enable if you enable OSLC, you need a license for ProCloud server. Another another interface is, so new child element provide another interface, is the so-called integrations. I just name it integrations here, where there is possibility to get data into Enterprise Architect. This is the main strategy, is how to get data into Enterprise Architect to make references from your model to these foreign elements, and you can also write back something depending on the interfaces. We have, I just make a note, or yes, I really make a note. I just take a note here and name some. Yeah, so it's something like name the funny ones. Dropbox. Yeah, how to get an element from a Dropbox, or ServiceNow. How to get, if you have a well-structured ServiceNow, then you don't have to remodel all the PCs and network segments. You just can import that artifact. Or you have an Azure DevOps and you want to import requirements or issues, or you have a Jira, or you have something that's called Doors NG. Just to let you know, it's the new one. What I've seen today was Polarion already. Very new is Jama, and so on and so forth, and self-written. And here again, we are coming as in a dimension. Sparks will not provide everything. It makes no sense, because the entire world is millions of integrations. It's just sample implementations, or maybe very often requested ones, but you can write your own, and there you get the source code in C# or in C++ to write such stuff. Just to let you know, and this is related somehow to this interface. Then I have no right components. So with the commercial license, so below the line here, integration OSLC needs the commercial license of Procard Server, but there's also an easy entry level, but it brings power to the server. You don't have to implement it on the Enterprise Architect. You can do it headless. You don't need an API and front end for it. You can just provide interface on the backend, and that's Procard Server provides the capability that Enterprise Architect gets access to someone else. A nice one is also Enterprise Architect to Enterprise Architect, by the way. So you can use this integration also to make relationships to other repositories hosted that are used by Enterprise Architect, to get artifacts from other Enterprise Architects into your ecosystems by that. So it's already, again, compared to single user, I think you have to think about it, what makes sense in your organization. And yes, that's the thing. And now your modeling team is growing. You're not only 3 on the same place anymore, or 5, you're growing to 20, you're growing to 100 maybe, or I think the biggest installation we ever had was 10,000 models in one repository. But normally it's kind of between 5 and 20 in a team collaborating on one repository, up to 100 or something like that. But you have also people around modelers. So not only the people that know how to use Enterprise Architect, they're not afraid of using an interface. I have never touched the ribbons here. I just use the things. I did not care about Kanban and things, but people are getting off scared if they see too much. Good thing is in Enterprise Architect can customize it. But the good news is, if you have people that just want to see that one, so not everything, not the entire ecosystem, they just want to see the result, again, they can get this documentation generated, but they can have a more live access like with Proliberate. And so this is interesting. Or they just want to get lists, meaning a list of security aware artifacts, a list of a dashboard maybe, or they have to provide some input. A good sample I always show with Proliberate, it's not my session today, it's Proliberate, but here you see a number of elements. If I go for that one, I see quite a lot of artifacts and attributes, but I don't want to provide everybody everything to contribute, but maybe the keywords. I say, okay, hey, you guy, please provide me the keywords for that one, and everything else, don't touch it. And then Proliberate is a good gameplay. So in this third level of model maturity model, it's all about publishing. And some ideas around it is you will have more database repositories. That's maybe it's still one, but I think you will have the minimum typical approach is you have a dev environment, you have a test. It should not be text, it should be test environment, it should be production environment, or you structure it per project, per solution, per enterprise architecture, or you have a local repository, a global repository. Some people try to have only one repository. That's could also make sense, but you have also different aspects that you want to share. You have to deal somehow with versions, with maybe variants, and there are different approaches built in an enterprise architect, around enterprise architect. So I think that one of the great stories with enterprise architect that you can do quite a lot of things around and with enterprise architect, even if it's not built in, you can use that capability. I really appreciate that. You have maybe to introduce new roles. So this is not in the list, but here you see you will have in your organization persons that are model experts. They have experience. They know how to customize enterprise architect. They know how to develop an MDG technology. They do scripting. They can do things that automates the calculation of tagged values. They do model checking with Model Expert as an example. That's a tool, therefore it's a duplicate name. Then there are model citizens. They're just doing what they have to do. So maybe they are just business process modelers, and they know I'm allowed to go there. I will change the model. And then we have a huge number of people that just want to see what is their daily job, what is my process, what I have to perform. And so we have at least 3 different roles with Enterprise Architect. And for publishing, we have some versions or variants. Variant 1 is that what I typically like for presentations. Hey, cool. I do the modeling and Enterprise Architect. In the same model is published immediately in ProLaborate. You see what I model in ProLaborate in the same time, because you have one repository, it's live access. That's nice. I think a lot of people perform it like that. They don't want to have headache with multiple repositories. It's a fine approach. Others are just copying. It's like, okay, to avoid that, especially for enterprise architecture management, if you do merge acquisition operation, so you purchase another company and you decide how to change the management, then it could be challenging if you allow that everybody sees what you are currently planning, because then everybody can see that he as manager is already fired. So something like that, if you go in the enterprise architecture domain. In the model-based systems engineering, the similar issue. If you change your interface for future and it's not staged, it's not kind of stable, then you see the changes instead of what is currently active. And then a lot of people started just copying the entire repository, doing a nightly build or nightly session. I have one customer, he's working in development with SQL Server, and for production, it must be Oracle. Strategic decision. What he does is just making XMI import export, or I think it's really a database copy. I'm not sure, but he does it because he don't want to care, and he does database operations, whatever. They make a copy, and on a specific day, this is the new version. Then others are using scripts and say, okay, I just want to publish a part of my model, only everything that is approved, only that everything that is a stable ecosystem. What we have seen already before is some of them have kind of a deploy and merge process already. This is very often in regulated market. Using telemetry automation is also a possibility. So we have more possibilities how to say, okay, this is now a staging scenario that is for the public audience, and this is for the model for the developer audience. So we have more possibilities. So the different roles, of course, use ProLaborate, and there are 2 purposes to use ProLaborate. The first one, maybe the first one, that's here, it's the second one. The first one is to collaborate also with the modelers. So of course, in Enterprise Architect, there's a nice feature to have discussions, to have review process and so on. But in nowadays world, there is a lot of integration into a Jira ecosystem in DevOps. So there are tools around Enterprise Architect, and I really like this ProLaborate capability to also review and discuss using ProLaborate in the team of the modelers. So there is a repository that is shared for the modelers, And then there is a publishing process where the models agree, okay, now we have a model and we are ready to publish. And there is a publishing process that kind of copies the database into an ecosystem that is then visible for all the others that are not part of the modeling team. So just to give you some ideas, could be very different, just therefore I named it ideas, could be very different in your ecosystem, but some ideas here. What I think is also key is not to do only modeling. Think more about automation. What can I automate? What is this boring, stupid things you redo on a daily basis? We have a great implementation in Belgium. It's Lapnov. Maybe you've heard about that framework. It's very big and powerful and addresses a lot of things. But the key is not the MDG. It's also great that they have an MDG, but the key there is a lot of automation, a lot of thoughts that are already built in. And this is where our partners are working on, or Reframe Avant, it's another partner, providing automation based on a specific structure, based on already thoughts for risk management for insurance companies, and so on and so forth. And of course, in a collaboration or publishing scenario, you also have to think about reusable assets. You publish a component. Another approach could be lemon tree components, but reusable asset service. There was a specific session today about this feature that is also coming with ProCloud Server that allows that you have kind of versioned parts and pieces, packages, but you have to be clever not to have conflicts and not too much cross-package dependencies. This is what the reusable asset service provides. So how does this look like? This looks like in Enterprise Architect. So I now come to my personal challenge, how to do a model with different stages. But again, here we have decided here there is a database. And I said, okay, this database is for the modelers. Under development, you could say. Another approach could be that you have in the same model another root model, but this is just another approach. And what you can also do, you can have another artifact, the published database. Could be the same database server as I mentioned before. It could be others. Yeah. And you can think about having a publishing process. So we will have kind of a component wherever it runs. A component typically on an application server. This could be an application server using OSLC interface, doing some automation. So server-based PowerShell, yeah, whatever you use. I have seen so much already using Enterprise Architect, including running things in the server. So it's so we as Sparks are really open-minded in whatever you want to use. You use the PowerShell and this PowerShell scripts, and I will not do in a static architecture model a process. We have already developed a combination of a static model, including then the communication model. Here we would need now an activity or workflow or whatever BPMN model, how to describe how the things are not playing together. But I explain it right now. You have a PowerShell script that goes to at a specific point in time using the OSLC interface to the database. There they grab a specific node and publish it to the other database. That's the easiest way. A lot of people have implemented in Enterprise Architect, so we can do it right like that. They implemented an add-in to Enterprise Architect or just a script that does this operation. Or I don't want to mention here scriptlets because scripts is more live, but here it's an add-in. You perform that operation. You have a button like under specialize. You have a button where you publish stuff or do stuff operations. In Enterprise Architect, it's also a possibility. Again, I don't visualize the workflow. And another story, lemon tree automation would be similar to the PowerShell. So maybe I write here lemon tree automation because I know it personally very well. And here is another alternative to perform that operations. Okay, so this is kind of bringing another dimensions into that. Another possibility is, of course, to have the scripts in a vertical versioning, meaning you create the model root. This is another alternative. Oops, I have to go to the model root to create a new model root and name it publish. This is also maybe a clever idea somehow, because this could be the node that is published to Proliberate, and then you have only one database. It's a magic question, but you can do a lot of stuff also within one repository. The models I have in mind are having 30,000 or 300,000 model elements, and if you have then versions and models in the same, it could be complicated. But if you have a smaller model, 10,000 elements, 15,000 elements, maybe this is also a nice thinkable and fine approach. Yeah, I think a lot of people do it like that. So this was what I want to mention for level 3. But now it comes to another dimension. The next dimension is that you have to model, not because you need it or you do it for your day-to-day work. It's because a regulator or a state or a certification requires models. In this examples, we have this ISO 26262. There are others, they say 26262 for automotive, or we have this DO 187C for aviation and other standards that and also for banking and insurances, especially in Europe, for GDPR, they say you need to have an enterprise architecture model. It's not enough. It's not enough to have. It's not enough to have. That's a good question. It's not enough to have a model. You have to have a version of the model. You have to go back in time and so on. And then we have a more complex ecosystem. And again, it's just scenarios. It could be a Git-based approach. It could be a version-controlled approach. But you have to think about that a model change is also triggered, and not only you are not only the model anymore. You are in a task around the model. So I think then you have to have a version-controlled backend. Very popular for software is Git. I know that Git is for other domains like Nightmare, but in the software domain, systems engineering domain, it's very popular. I know also in the bank insurance for database architecture, for data architecture, sorry, it's also very popular to use it. You need a very structured change management for the model itself. You have to keep historic stages. So not only the current version and the baseline, but to have the situation, the exact database from that time. You can make copies of databases. Was in past very often the only chance to achieve that. And because you need it for any evidence in the future. As example, for a court process, if a person was injured by the autonomous AI-driven vehicle, you have to provide the model from that point in time that must be sealed. And this is kind of a different story if you go to regulation. Time is going by. Short story is I have currently identified 4 levels of maturity. I think there is another, it's a level 5, is optimizing. To identify what we can do better is the same as with CMMI level, that you optimize your process, that you have more automation, that you have verification of that what is in the model. If the people do the right things, get notified, and not only by peer groups, but notifications automatically. And so I think this is a nice approach. And have in mind, where is your organization at the moment? Where are you? Are you here with a central database? Are you already thinking about publishing? Are you in a regulated environment? Or as a person, I do very often that stuff, but I see a lot of customers in that world. So everything is has its right to exist. And yes, you are not alone. Please share your thoughts. I'm happy to answer your questions in the Teams session. Hey, it's on time. Perfect.
Thanks, Peter. So we have some questions on the chat. Do you know some DevOps conferences or books that combine DevOps with models? Or do you have any recommendations for that?
I will write a book. I have not seen so far. I have borrowed a lot of ideas from DevOps, and because DevOps, the term DevOps is since 2009, I think, and there's a new term called DevSecOps because models are also becoming not only for systems and software, it's becoming also for security important. And there, the interesting story is if you have only developers in mind, I think it's not enough. You have as I also identified, hey, I really would appreciate that enterprise architect is used by more developers. In reality, it's used by architects, and developers do not care about models. As a matter of fact, they still are coders and hackers, and I think you can get so much benefit. But I have learned to deal. Hey, we have to find the people who are architects and who are aware about the maturity and who are aware about how to deal with group of people and not with a person who wants to generate code. So I really like that idea to generate things automatically, and therefore DevOps is for me a okay term. As a fun fact, in the last session I posted, we should name it ModOps, meaning model and operations, how to bring a model into operation. But I think we will definitely, I will bring out a white paper by mid of October describing a little bit more what we have learned the last 5 years as Spark services from our customers and what they do and what they want to achieve. Maybe there are some white papers in between. Just to share our thoughts, to include this modeling as a part of the entire workflow in your organization. So including the V model, including agile aspects. It will be a small book because I want to make it useful. But yes, I have not seen a DevOps conference with models so far, and I think I like to be pioneer. Yes, and I think I am.
Yeah. Thanks for the detailed explanation. Yeah, and there's one more. Is there any way to export the discussions?
From what?
From EA. I believe so.
I think the challenge is that there's a minimal challenge because I think ProLaborate is kind of an extension in the past, and now it's part of our ecosystems. And the current issue with the discussions is that there is a built-in functionality and there is the ProLaborate functionality. And if you start nowadays, I would definitely recommend to use the ProLaborate capabilities because it's a web-based, it's writing, it's sending email notifications because not everybody in the world is having Enterprise Architect open all the time as I have. I have all the time Enterprise Architect open, but maybe not all repositories I have. And if the discussion is only within one repository, then I would have to open that repository that I get informed. And therefore, the ProLaborate way to have cross repositories notifications is that way that fits more to my personal collaboration way. So discussions, I would go for discussions for ProLaborate. The only issue I see there, the integration of the ProLaborate discussion into Enterprise Architect. There is a plugin, but it's a little bit outdated. So if you discuss, stay in ProLaborate. And I'm not sure, maybe you can answer. If you can export the discussion from ProLaborate, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we will take that, Peter.
As a feature request, yes, that's easy. A good answer.
All right. So I think since we are running out of time, I'll ask the participants to post the queries in the Teams channel. And thanks, Peter. Thanks for your time, and thanks for taking us through the various dimensions of modeling. With so much patience, you did it perfectly well, and walking us through the live model, it was perfect. And to achieve, this will also help us, help the organizations achieve the best result out of why do they started with modeling. And so thanks for the same. Thanks for the participants for spending your evening with us. Hope it was very informative, and it gave deeper insight into the modeling maturity topic. Peter and his team will be available in the Microsoft team to have a detailed discussion and to answer more questions. You could use the Teams channel. So I have pasted the channel link in the chat window. And if you still have any issues in accessing the Teams channel, you could write to the email, which is again pasted in the chat, which is registrations@eaglobalsummit.com. Thanks once again, everyone. Looking forward to hosting you in another wonderful session. Thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Bye.